Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. Hello. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ali, and today I bring you another book review. And we're winding down to the end of these book reviews for the month of Ramadan. And this one is Losing My Religion, A Call for Help. It's by Jeffrey Lang. Dr. Jeffrey Lang was a professor of mathematics at the University of Kansas, and he's the author of the best-selling book entitled Struggling to Surrender, and also another book entitled Even Angels Ask. I read the former, though not the latter, and this one. And this one here really has been an eye-opener for me, and it has helped me in my work of da'wah, of presenting the message of Islam to the wider world. It has alerted me to the fact that people are really out there. First of all, there are people struggling to become Muslim and to remain as Muslims. But this book takes it up a notch by saying that there are people out there who are complaining, I am losing my religion. Now, this I just got wind this morning of a song that's a popular song by the same name, Losing My Religion. It's one of my television crew folks who alerted me to that. I didn't know that. But nonetheless, this book, Losing My Religion, why does it have this title? Because Dr. Lang said that over the years, people have been writing to him. He's been collecting all and responding to these emails. And eventually he realized that a lot of the emails had a similar type of flavor where people are starting to doubt the religion they're asking for help. Please help me here. I'm losing it. I'm losing faith. Please explain this to me. So he started to compile he started to put all of those into a folder with this name, Losing My Religion. And eventually he compiled a book that is based on those emails. So we can see his email, the original emails, and also his responses to those emails, at least, in the polished form in which he presents them in this book. And in reading these emails, maybe you'll find that, one of these emails could very easily have come from you. You'll say, oh, that looks like something I could have said. And that's a question I had as well. And I would like the answer to that. For example, many people ask about hadith. How do we know that hadiths are authentic? And as one person says here, the more I read the hadiths, the less I believe, something to this effect. And he says that if I could have, not just excluded these beliefs, excluded these hadiths, put them aside, then it would have been easier for me to believe in the religion of Islam. So the hadiths then become a kind of a hurdle for people if they want to become Muslim. And once they have become Muslim, sometimes they come across some hadiths, and that becomes a difficulty for them. Now, in the introduction to the book, Dr. Lang points out some of the reasons why the next generation of Muslims are losing their faith. They live in an environment and they go to school in circumstances in which everything around them is really calling them away from the faith, and their faith is and their culture is seeming to be at odds with what is there around them. For example, children go to school and they may be coloring something or drawing something that has to do with some aspect of belief or culture that is not necessarily their Muslim culture, and they would have to fit in with this broader culture. Children go to school with other kids, and from a very young age, he said elementary school, and that I found surprising, that at elementary school, children are already dating. And so the Muslim kids who come from conservative households and they would not date, before marriage, they are obviously are odds with this. They're at odds with this culture, and so they are finding themselves more and more isolated from their friends and their colleagues. Then drinking, he points out, has become a very common thing in society. and it's glamorized in so many different ways in popular culture. And naturally, the Muslim kid is going to feel isolated from this. Now, adultery and fornication, these are obviously prohibited in the world's great religions, but we will find that in America, speaking of American culture, and then in American culture, we find that this is something that is quite acceptable. And even younger and younger children are starting to become sexually active. So in all of these different ways, the youth are feeling isolated from the culture that is out there. But then the youth come to the Muslim mosques and they find themselves isolated from the culture of the Muslim mosques in a different way, in that the culture from the Muslim mosques may be representative of a conservative culture in another part of the world. And some of the older folks who are governing the mosque may impose certain strictures and expect the youth to behave in a certain way, not giving any allowance for the fact that these are American kids and they're growing up in America. Their culture is going to be naturally shaped by the situation of life around them. And so there is an expectation and a yardstick by which the youth are being judged. And eventually the youth start to feel a little bit uneasy in that mosque situation because they're being judged by standards that are very difficult for them to live up to. One of the issues he points out here is that in the broader culture out there, people don't respect the elderly anymore. And in the Muslim mosques, he's not saying necessarily that's a bad thing. He's just saying that, or a good thing. He's just saying we need to recognize that there's this difference, because in the Muslim culture, elders are respected. And of course, if children give a kind of an answer that does not reveal that sort of respect to the elders, then this will be another reason for judging the child, and then the child will feel sort of isolated from that environment, uneasy because the child is constantly being judged and criticized. One crucial issue he points out that we need to be aware of is that in the broader culture, especially in the schooling and university system nowadays, the idea of critical thinking is very much prized. Everyone is taught to think for themselves, and you don't just simply follow authority. Whereas in the Muslim culture, people are taught to follow authority and sometimes to do so unquestioningly. And this can create a sort of dichotomy, because once one raises a critical question, then this becomes a question about their faith. Do you really believe? Or, what's going on in your own mind? Do you really have strong faith or not? And so on. So with situations like this, we can understand why the next generation would be losing their religion. But it's not just simply the youth. They're just educated, thinking people who are trying to make sense of their religion, and they're finding that some things do not quite add up. For example, one of the issues he tackles here is the belief in al-qada wal-qadar, the belief that everything is predestined for you. So he goes to great lengths to explain a viewpoint that will help to make better sense of this doctrine. And he speaks about God's knowledge being timeless. So maybe that's one way of grappling with this. But whether this or some other way, I think that it is well worth reading what he has to say here and making up your own mind as to whether this is the explanation that you want to grasp. But whether you grasp this explanation or not, you must understand that there is a problem and that there is a real struggle here of people who want to maintain their faith and how they're going to maintain that faith. Now, I spoke a lot about this from the perspective of people in America, but there is an interesting email here from a Canadian woman who speaks about some of the difficulties that women experience trying to hold on to their Muslim faith and the explanations that they need for certain statements and traditional mores and customs which we find in the religion of Islam. So I think that altogether Muslims need to read this book. We need to be aware that even if we, especially now in the month of Ramadan, are feeling a high level of Iman as we come to the end of Ramadan, we have to be aware that there will be people who will have to struggle with the rest of the year outside of Ramadan. And while we were steeped in worship, perhaps we didn't think of big existential questions. But after Ramadan is over, people will start thinking of those questions again. They need reasonable and convincing answers. We need to give them the answers. We need to help our youth to stay within the religion. We need to help them to understand the religion. We need to adjust the culture in our mosques so our youth and women feel more welcome and accommodated. They feel that their ideas are being listened to and being implemented. They can, if they see that they're getting positions of leadership and responsibility in the mosques, and they are able to shape the Muslim culture and Muslim society in a way that makes it either truly American or truly Canadian, but at the same time, that is truly and authentically Muslim, given the original sources of Islam being the Quran and the genuine life example of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So, losing my religion, a call for help. Let this be our answer to those who are losing their religion, so that they find their religion because they find the help and they get the answers that they seek. This book has shaped my thinking about what we need to do for the Muslim society, the Muslim community, and for the Muslim youth. The book has actually shaped my own thoughts on some of the questions that it addresses, many of the questions that it addresses. So it's a book that has actually changed my life. And I hope that this book will make a difference in your life. Perhaps it may even change your life. Thank you for watching. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ali. Assalamu alaikum. You can change someone's life this Ramadan. Donate as much or as little as you can and be part of our project to share the message of Islam to people across the globe. Visit QuranSpeaks.com and donate. Your contribution is zakat eligible and tax deductible. May God keep you safe and healthy. May God bless you and your loved ones with the very best always.